what, 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 what?
911, what's your emergency?
Yeah, I think there's a shooting at my school.
We have units on the way. Can you find, do you see any perpetrators and then with a gun?
No, not really. Like, seems like a lot of people out here.
Can you tell me where you are? How many people? Can you see the perpetrators? Can you see the guys with the guns?
I don't know.
Are you inside or outside? Hello? Check that out. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Look at her right there.
I didn't really think I had an urge to kill her. I just wanted her to stop. And
What did you want to do to her?
what did I want to do with her? Just to have her stop and aggression on. I couldn't take it on my mom. I had to take it on my animals and
How many
your
animals
kids.
did you kill?
I killed a lot of birds, but one cat suffocated in a ice chest,
Mm-hmm.
and shot babies at dogs and to hurt them, and
Okay. Walk me through what you were going to do with the knife in your head to your mother.
cut her throat.
I think a lot of it is, from childhood again, they get their core message that I'm not valuable, I'm not important, or I have to please everybody else to get noticed. And so they have these core messages that are damaged. And so the only way to get maybe recognized later in life is to be, is to do something bad. At least if I'm being bad, somebody will notice what I'm doing, And so it's all ministering to these core messages that I'm not good enough. Any kind of distraction strategy, whatever it is, stealing, gambling, shopping, drugs, alcohol, maybe even murdering someone, they're all trying to minister to unmet emotional needs that stem from childhood.
When he wanted to work on flower beds that he put in around the house, it was like, the sissy thing to do. And Dad was very vocal about that.
The father would often ridicule Johnny in front of his sisters and other children in the neighborhood.
It's just a constant stream of you wimp.
Kids need intervention by 15. If they're born into chaos or they're neglected. Neglect is worse than being abused, because neglect is like nobody cares about me. At least when you're being abused, somebody's paying attention to you, even though it's in a really bad way. My family life's not safe. I'm going to go and maybe join this group of people, which might be a gang. And, part of gang initiation is to do things like harm people. And so that becomes your way of being. That becomes your wheelhouse, so to speak. And your brain attunes to it. This is the way I need to be. And, there are studies, too, that when we do brain scans of kids, like I've seen brain scans of 5-year-olds where they have a brain of a 5-year-old that has everything they need, and the brain is developing normally. And then they show a brain scan of a kid that's been abused, and there's big gaps. You can see it on the brain scan. The brain stops developing, especially the frontal lobes, or alcohol, gambling, sex, whatever it might be, to help cope. And then that just gets worse. And for people that have like pathological disorders, like killers, they reach out for stuff to help cope with the disruption in their system.
Okay.
And I don't know, for killers, I think a lot of them are sociopaths. They have no ability to have empathy. That childhood is paramount for people developing normally. Excuse me.
And so for killers, would you say that it would have to do more specifically like with the childhood, the bring up, so if they didn't have that love? Or is that an in general sort of thing that you'll typically be more aggressive growing up if you don't have that in your life?
I think, children really need proper boundaries. There's 3 things that somebody needs for a trauma to imprint, and it usually happens early, is unpredictability, no
Okay.
control, and no support. And usually, like if somebody's being sexually abused or physically abused or whatever, usually the little kid has no control over it. They don't know when it's going to happen. It's unpredictable. And usually they have no one to talk to about it. There's no support. So that trauma will imprint in the body. And then once those traumas imprint in the body, it disrupts our cellular memory, it disrupts our neurochemistry. Then they have to start reaching out to stuff to cope with, to help cope with that, with their disruption in their body, you know. So they start reaching out for drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex, whatever it might be to help cope.
Johnny's father would escape to the basement, where he would drink brandy before supper. Marion and the children would wait at the dinner table in fear and silence until he climbed the stairs drunk.
And babies need to be attended to. They need to have a parent or a primary caregiver modeling for them emotion and attachment and love. If that doesn't happen, the baby's brain, you know, if like a baby's just left to go cry it out all by themselves and nobody attends to them, the baby's brain can go into a parasympathetic state of withdrawal, and an opiate-like chemical gets released so the baby can self-soothe. And then that can lead to addictions later in life. It starts out from day zero.
If the children misbehaved, he would spank them with a razor strap.
We actually learned how to toughen up against it. And John especially, he would not cry. He would not cry. And sometimes I think that made Dad angry.
You know, what happens for the developing brain and how people cope, and, you know, is there a tipping point where there's no going back, you know? One thing like behavioral addictions, that's using, shopping, gambling, you know, things like that, pornography use or whatever. We know that damages the brain, but with sobriety and with a really strong treatment plan, the brain can heal from a process addiction, behavioral process addiction. Chemical addiction, drugs, alcohol, you can do permanent damage.
And those affect what part of your brain?
It's just, you know, I'm not really, you know, I know that with behavioral addictions, it's a lot of the frontal lobes. But, you know, with the chemical addictions, I think there's other parts of the brain. There's lots of parts of the brain that can be affected. You know, and a lot of times it's just our ability to make proper choices and have empathy and be present, authentic. And so, you know, we're just getting on the cusp of studying the brain now. You know, every mental health disorder that's out there is brain related in some way. Okay, what happened to this brain? You know, as like if they're being sexualized, sexually abused at age 5, you know, we develop our sexual sense of ourselves right around that age. You know, what happens to that kid if they're sexually abused? You know, their brain gets disrupted, we know that. And then sometimes they play their stuff out later in very destructive ways.
Flower bomb, let me guess your favorite fragrance, and you got that bomb. I'm trying that in nature, no disrespecting, baby. Just try and make you smile. Try to keep my spirits up, that's why I lace it down. Try to keep your spirits up.